Yo, Headliner Nation, what is going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners to help you all roll right into Week 8 and hopefully keep the momentum going towards the fantasy football playoffs. Now, if you watched our hits and misses show from the other day, you know last week was a good week for us at the tight end position. Some really good calls. We've got a couple of injuries that we're working our way through now at the tight end position. Obviously, Travis Kelce, Gerald Everett, a couple of guys that have been fantasy mainstays to begin the season. They're going to be out on the bye weeks this week, so you might be looking to stream a couple of options, and I've got some guys for you to take a look at. But let's get things kicked off with Thursday Night Football. Baltimore is going to be at Tampa Bay. Mark Andrews, not a great performance last week. Now, some of that may have been attributed to him still being a little bit banged up. We know late in the week, it was kind of, still a questionable call with that knee injury. I put him down for a 3 on the injury score here, just in case he is still a little bit banged up and being a short week, something to keep an eye on. But if we own Mark Andrews, we certainly are not going to set him. For Tampa Bay, the matchup is okay for Cade Otton, but it's not good enough for me to run with him this week. The big problem for me is yes, there might be an opportunity there for you, but it's more of a risky opportunity. The offense has not looked good. Tom Brady has not looked good. Mike Evans is getting a ton of targets. Chris Godwin is getting a ton of targets. You still have Leonard Fournette that you use in the passing game. There's just not enough potential upside for me with that. Now, if he finds the end zone, that's great. But even then, how much volume does he realistically get? I'd love to give him a shot at some point this season, but if you're looking to stream somebody, I've got some other matchups in this video that might benefit you a little bit more. We've got ourselves a London matchup as Denver and Jacksonville head across the pond to face off in London this week. Dulcich for Denver is looking really good right now. Based on the score, though, giving him an 18, I don't know if his upside is as high as what the score indicates. Now, one of the reasons that he's so high in production and volume is because he's only played 2 games this season. One, he scored a touchdown, and the other one, he got some really good volume in. So his per-game stats right now might be a little bit inflated. With that being said, this is a tough matchup against Jacksonville that only allows 7.2 fantasy points per game to tight ends. I'm still going to start him. However, he is more of a high-risk, low-end type of start for me. He is a guy that more than likely will probably be just outside the top 12 tight ends or kind of right there at that 11, 12, 13, 14 mark. Evan Engram. He's caught 15 receptions over the last 2 weeks, 176 yards the last 3 games. He's looking a lot better in terms of production, not scoring, which brings his production score down quite a bit, but he might be the safest pass catching option, which is weird to say, in Jacksonville right now. This Denver matchup is not great for him, but the matchup for the wide receivers is even tougher. I expect Mark Ingram. No. Wrong one. I expect Evan Engram to get us a nice amount of touches and targets this week. Carolina and Atlanta is not bringing us a whole lot of good vibes this week. Obviously, you've got Tommy Tremble, Ian Thomas for Atlanta, and Tremble found the end zone last week, and Atlanta allows the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. But we already have enough issues with fantasy as it is this season. Putting Thomas or Tremble in, do we really want to add to that? I don't think so. We're not starting either. What about a guy that a lot of you probably spend a 3rd or 4th round pick on? Kyle Pitts continues a very disappointing season. Now, Pitts right now is going to move to my bench. Atlanta, while significantly trailing Cincinnati this last week, still only threw the ball 13 times, and Pitts got 5 of those targets. Atlanta, for some reason or another, doesn't care what the score is. They want to run. And guess what? They really don't have that great of a run game. This is not a great matchup. He's not getting the volume. Atlanta doesn't have a commitment to throwing the ball, and when they do, it's inconsistent. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle Pitts is a sit moving forward. Chicago at Dallas, and the Bears offense is looking a little bit better. Justin Fields looked good on Monday Night Football. I mean, and they're starting to move the offense a little bit more, it feels like, but it still has not brought any consistency to the wide receivers or, unfortunately, Cole Kmet. For Dalton Schultz, I mean, Chicago allows the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight end, and Schultz saw a decent amount of looks last week with Dak being back, and I expect this relationship to get back on track, but given that it is a tough matchup for me personally, I'm probably going to skip out on Dalton Schultz this week and maybe look towards another option that has some higher upside. Speaking of upside, there's a whole lot of risk in the Miami and Detroit matchup this week, but both of these guys are going to be starts for me, which is weird because I don't want to start Mike Gesicki, but the matchup is way too good. Detroit allows the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends right now, and Gesicki really this season has been summed up with 2 big games and really just performances the rest of the way. Is this going to be a big game, or is it going to be an performance? If you need upside, Gesicki has some. If you need safety, you definitely don't want him. And for TJ Hockenson last week, he caught 4 of his 5 receptions for 48 yards. Now, targets not bad with 5, and so far this season, he's top 12 at the tight end position on a per game basis in production and for targets. This coming week, is Amon-Ra St. Brown going to be back, or will he remain in the concussion protocol? Will Josh Reynolds be healthier? When is DeAndre Swift going to play? If we have kind of this perfect storm of a lot of people missing, then we go back to kind of what TJ Hockenson did a few weeks ago, where he had a huge game with basically everybody out, and we would have to go with him as a start going up against Miami. Arizona at Minnesota is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Do not forget, head over to manscaped.com. Find yourself maybe some stuff for yourself, maybe a gift for somebody special in your life, some stocking stuffers. Throw it all in your cart. Use code word headliners. You're going to get 20% off your entire purchase and free shipping. Arizona at Minnesota. Minnesota allows the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. So I am liking Zach Ertz to get back on track against Minnesota this week. Ertz had a bad game last week. Absolutely, he did. But again, this is really too good of a matchup for me this week. I am absolutely going to be in on the Manscaped must-watch matchup. And then, oh, by the way, why don't we do a prize picks right now as well? And I'm also going to take the over on Zach Ertz to hit 44.5 receiving yards against this Minnesota team. Now, on the other side for Irv Smith Jr., Arizona allows the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Smith has not been great at times this season. There's been some inconsistencies, but given the matchup, and I think his ability to show up in some better matchups this year, we go back to him this week and we cross our fingers he finds the end zone. Las Vegas at New Orleans, and as of right now, there's still a whole lot up in the air with Darren Waller. We hoped that he was going to be able to make it back after the bye. That did not happen. Still seems to be banged up. And New Orleans allows the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. So with Waller being banged up, just keep an eye on the rankings coming out on Thursday. If anything were to change, if Waller is deemed healthy, I'll reevaluate it. And maybe we do go ahead and switch him over to a high risk start given the matchup. But just keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that ask, Foster Moreau is not a thing with Darren Waller being out. Don't even worry about it. For New Orleans, though, Las Vegas allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to tight end. I'm going back to Juwan Johnson this week. Why? Because we still might not have Michael Thomas and we still might not have Jarvis Landry. If those guys are missing, we absolutely have to give Juwan Johnson a shot. He's producing and getting targets when those guys are not around. Absolutely got to give him a shot. For Taysom Hill, as always, he's a risk. If you want to take his 1 touchdown that he got last week for, what was it, like 4 receiving yards or something, he didn't even score 10 fantasy points. That's great at the tight end position. Not bad. But you got to stop. You've got to stop, ladies and gentlemen, saying, oh, he's got the highest upside of really anybody at the tight end position outside of Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, so I'm going to play him. No. He's got a way worse floor than several guys as well. At the tight end position, if you told me every single week, Kyle, I guarantee you're going to get 8 to 10 points from this guy. Would you want him over a guy that most weeks you might get anywhere between like maybe 3 and 6, and some weeks he might hit 20? I'll take the consistency every week. The Patriots and the Jets have a ton of talent at the tight end position in this matchup, but none of it is being utilized. Who will the starting quarterback even be for New England? Yeah, Bailey Zappi came in and had that touchdown pass that really wasn't even that good of a pass. Hate me if you want to, ladies and gentlemen. And then he threw 2 more interceptions the rest of the way and didn't look that great. Okay, so are they going to go ahead and go back to Mac Jones? We don't know right now, but for the time being, we're going to go ahead and back off of it. Tyler Conklin has really disappeared. Since Zach Wilson came back, this was part of the concern that when he was there, that they would start to spread the ball around a little bit more. And last week, in a matchup which they didn't have Elijah Moore active, Tyler Conklin still didn't do anything. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is another great matchup at the tight end position this week. Really, Pat Freiermuth is the peanut butter to Pickett's jelly. I mean, they just go together. These two guys are definitely getting involved in terms of that connection on the football field. Kenny Pickett is looking to Pat Muth a lot, and I absolutely love that for the tight end position. Pat last week led the team in yards and seems to really be that top option. The matchup against Philadelphia isn't bad, so I'm expecting Muth to get involved quite a bit. And for Dallas Goedert, Pittsburgh does allow the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So just know that there is a little bit more of a variable here than what we're used to seeing. But Dallas Goedert might be one of the safest options in Philadelphia right now. He's one of the guys that we're seeing consistent targets for on a weekly basis. And because of that, we've got to throw him back out there. Tennessee and Houston, and don't let Austin Hooper's team-leading receiving yards fool you last week. He is still not an option for us in fantasy football. And on the flip side, Jordan Akins is going to be a start for me. Now, I will say this. In the past, Jordan Akins has been my kryptonite. He's had some good games. I've liked the matchup. I've said, okay, let's roll with Akins in this matchup, and he absolutely does nothing. Kind of one of those things where if I call it, he does bad. If I don't call it, he does good. But Akins is kind of that tight end one now in Houston. 68 receiving yards last week. I do think he's starting to kind of take over for Brevin Jordan, because when he's healthy, he's the number 1, and then Brevin Jordan kind of number 2 to him right now. And it's not a bad matchup. So he's a high-risk start for me this week. Really, Jordan Akins is going to be for those of you in deeper leagues that need to stream somebody and you just can't seem to find anyone. Washington and Indianapolis, and a big question mark surrounding Washington right now is Logan Thomas. When are we going to get him back? Been dealing with a calf issue. Unfortunately, didn't play last week. And this is a really good matchup. Indianapolis allows the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. I would love to run with Logan Thomas this week, but unfortunately, as of right now, it's really hard to do that. And even if he does come back this week, does the matchup really warrant us risking it for his first game back? We'll talk about that in the rankings videos if things change. For Indianapolis, Washington allows the 5th fewest fantasy points per game. And on top of that, they rotate their 3 tight ends so much, it's really hard to pinpoint who's going to have a big day. San Francisco and the Los Angeles Rams bring us 2 of the better tight ends in the league right now. For George Kittle, over the last 2 games, he's caught 14 of his 19 targets for 181 yards and a touchdown. I knew it was coming. We just had to hold tight, and here he is. Production is picking up. He's looking really good. And I still don't feel like CMC is going to cause that big of an issue. I know there's some people that disagree with me, but I just don't feel like George Kittle is going to be the guy that's going to lose a bunch of targets because of it. For the Rams, they do allow the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. And I know it's going to be maybe more of a difficult matchup, but I can't be off George Kittle. He's playing way too well, and he's always been one of Jimmy G's number 1 looks. I've got to go with George Kittle in a tough matchup again this week. And for Tyler Higbee, kind of the same thing. It is a tough matchup, but he's kind of that number 2 guy right now for Matthew Stafford. After Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee is the guy that's getting more and more looks. Now, when Van Jefferson returns, does that mess with him a little bit? We'll wait and see about that. But for right now, Tyler Higbee, even though he doesn't have a fantastic ceiling, is one of the safer tight ends in the league. For the Giants in Seattle, just as Bellinger was starting to, look like he was picking up speed, he ends up going down with an orbital fracture and will miss the rest of the season. Just had surgery on his eye socket. Really, really tough to stomach. This was a dude that I was excited for, and he got a great matchup this week as well. Seattle allows the most fantasy points to tight ends. This was the week where I thought we were going to see the Bellinger breakout. It looks like Chris Myrick is going to be the guy moving forward. I'm not going to start him in this matchup, though, not knowing really anything about what this guy could really bring to the table for us this week. I am going to go to Will Dissly as a start again this week, though, because probably not going to have any DK Metcalf, and we might be missing him for a little bit of time. Luckily, nothing surgery related, so it could last the rest of the season, but it does look like we're going to be missing him for some time. So because of that, I do think maybe we see a little more targets for Dissly, who saw, I believe it was four targets last week. Maybe we start to see more like 4, 5, 6 targets a week, and that would be more than enough to make him fantasy viable. Green Bay and Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. And there's not a whole lot that I'm excited for in this matchup for the tight ends. Now, Robert Tonyan is going to be a start for me, and I don't know if I really trust it. Green Bay doesn't look real good right now. The matchups on the outside to the wide receivers are going to be a lot tougher, though. Buffalo does an okay job against tight ends, but they're even better against wide receivers. So I think that we're going to see Big Bobby Tonyan get a few targets this week. For Dawson Knox, Green Bay allows the third fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Dawson Knox hasn't done anything this season, so I'm not expecting that to happen this week. Wrapping things up on Monday Night Football, an AFC North matchup with Cincinnati and Cleveland facing off. Chase is balling, Boyd is crushing, Higgins is still seeing targets. Hayden Hurst is to the back of our minds. Now we're going to go ahead and make him a sit in this matchup. David Njoku for Cleveland, one of the safest options so far this season. Unfortunately goes down with that injury, could miss anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. Harrison Bryant is going to step in as kind of that number one tight end now. We'll see how that looks in the coming weeks, but at this current time, not enough excitement for me to start him this week. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me in this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully all of you are staying safe and healthy right now. Hit that like button for me if you're new here to the channel. Subscribe as well, and leave us a comment down below. Let us know which tight end matchup you are most excited for. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.